When Anna tidied her late mother's wardrobe, she expected scarves and perfume, not a secret. Inside a small, pearl-clasped purse lay a single train ticket, unused, edges soft with time. Date: the 12th of June, 1974. Departure: Platform 3. Destination: Riverton. On the back, in her mother's careful handwriting, "If you're brave, go." Anna had never heard of Riverton, never knew her mother had planned to leave, perhaps for love, perhaps for a life she never took. That unpunched ticket felt less like paper and more like a pulse, a doorway to a choice her mother abandoned at the last minute, and the person who might still be waiting at the end of that line. Would you follow the ticket or close the purse? Subscribe to Years Ago Stories for the journey that rewrites a lifetime. The afternoon light slanted through the lace curtains, painting quiet patterns across the bedroom walls. Dust floated in the air, dancing in slow spirals like the memory of something that refused to settle. Anna stood in the middle of her late mother's room, surrounded by neatly folded linens, porcelain trinkets, and the faint scent of lavender. Everything about the space was tidy, orderly except for the air, which still hummed with the presence of the woman who had lived there. Her mother, Margaret Hale, had been the kind of woman whose strength whispered instead of shouted. She'd raised Anna alone after her husband's death and never once complained. Her life seemed simple: morning walks, tea at 4, volunteer work at the library, until that day when Anna found the purse. It was small, cream-colored, and embroidered with fading flowers. It lay tucked inside the top drawer of the wardrobe, beneath a folded silk scarf Anna had never seen before. She opened it gently. Inside were a few coins, a pressed daisy, and the train ticket. Riverton, the 12th of June, 1974. Platform 3. Anna blinked. She had been born in 1976, 2 years after the ticket's date. Her mother would have been 26, then young, unmarried, and living in the same seaside town she'd never left afterward. But Riverton? She had never mentioned it once. Anna turned the ticket over and froze when she saw the handwriting. Her mother's delicate cursive, faded but unmistakable. "If you're brave, go." She sank into the armchair by the window, the ticket trembling between her fingers. The words didn't sound like the Margaret she knew, cautious, sensible, always rooted in routine. These words belonged to someone who once dreamed, who once stood at a station and considered walking away from everything she knew. That evening, Anna called her Aunt Evelyn, her mother's older sister. "Evelyn," she began softly, "I was going through Mom's things. I found something." "What kind of something?" "A train ticket to Riverton from 1974. There was a long silence on the line. Then a sigh. "Ah, so you found that." "You knew about it?" "I knew she had it, but I didn't know she kept it all these years." Evelyn's voice softened, as if she were walking through memories she had tried to forget. She was supposed to go that day. She even packed a small suitcase. "Go where?" "Why Riverton?" "She never told me." Another pause. "But she came home that evening with tears in her eyes. I asked her what happened. She said, 'The train left.' I didn't." Anna stared at the ticket, her pulse quickening. "Do you think she was running away?" "Maybe," Evelyn said quietly. "Or maybe she was running toward something. Either way, she never tried again." That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She laid the ticket on her bedside table and kept glancing at it as though it might whisper answers if she waited long enough. She imagined her mother standing on a crowded platform of the summer of 1974 train engines hissing, people saying hurried goodbyes, the sound of metal wheels grinding against rails. Did she hesitate at the last second? Did she see someone she loved on the train and decide it was too late? The thought gnawed at her until she could no longer ignore it. The next morning she opened her laptop and typed, "Riverton 1974 railway accident. Riverton June 1974 events. Riverton station history." There was nothing unusual, Just a quiet industrial town 3 hours inland, once known for its textile mills, now half forgotten. But then one small article caught her eye. Local man pens final letter before leaving Riverton, June 1974. The scan was grainy, the headline faded, but the name was clear. Thomas Green. Her heart skipped. She had never heard that name before, yet something about it felt familiar, like a melody half remembered. She clicked the image. The photograph accompanying the article showed a young man at a train platform, smiling awkwardly at the camera, a folded letter in his hand. Behind him, a departing train blurred into motion. The caption read, Thomas Green, age 27, seen at Riverton Station on the 12th of June 1974, the day he left for London. Anna leaned closer to the screen. Her pulse slowed. In the crowd behind him, faint but unmistakable, was a woman standing at the edge of the platform, her hair tied back, a cream purse in her hand. Her mother. Anna's breath caught. The photograph wasn't crystal clear, but she knew that stance, that tilt of the head, the way her mother's hand always rested lightly against her hip. She whispered, "Mom, what were you doing there?" The question didn't echo in the empty room, but the silence afterward felt heavy, like an answer waiting to be found. She looked again at the train ticket lying on her table. Riverton, the 12th of June, 1974. Platform 3. Her mother hadn't been buying a ticket from Riverton. She had been planning to take one to him. The next morning, the sea mist lingered over the streets of Eastbury, the small coastal town Anna had always called home. She sat at her kitchen table with two things in front of her, her mother's purse and a printed copy of that newspaper photo. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman in the background wasn't just similar. It was Margaret. Even the cream purse matched the one lying beside her now. Anna turned the ticket over again, tracing the faded message with her fingertip. "If you're brave, go," she whispered. "Did you mean for me to find this?" Her mother's handwriting seemed to echo through time, a dare, a confession, and perhaps an unfinished chapter begging to be read. Later that day, she visited the Riverton Historical Society, whose phone number she found buried at the bottom of the article's page. A woman named Marjorie Dean, cheerful and brisk, answered. "Thomas Green?" Anna asked, her voice tentative. "Do you have any information on him?" "I think he lived there in the 1972nd. "Oh, Tom Green," Marjorie said, her tone softening. "Yes, I knew of him. He worked at the textile mill before it closed. Lovely man, quiet, always reading. Left town rather suddenly, I think." "Do you know why he left?" "Something about a job offer in London," Marjorie replied. "But there were whispers he didn't go alone." Anna's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Well," Marjorie hesitated, lowering her voice. "There was talk of a woman he meant to meet at the station that day. Some say she never came. Some say she did, but too late." Anna gripped the phone. "Do you know her name?" "I'm afraid not, dear. But I remember he left a letter at the post office never sent. It was found years later when they cleared out the building. It's kept in our local archive now." Can I see it?" "Of course. We open at 9 tomorrow." The drive to Riverton took 3 hours. The road curved inland, trading the ocean's scent for damp earth and smoke. Anna played no music, preferring the quiet hum of the engine and her racing thoughts. When she arrived, the town felt like stepping into a preserved photograph. Narrow streets, brick storefronts with faded paint, and a train station that looked almost identical to the one in the article. The Riverton Historical Society occupied a small red brick building beside the old post office. Marjorie greeted her warmly, leading her to a back room lined with files and yellowed newspaper clippings. "Here it is," she said, handing Anna a sealed envelope labeled Green Tea, 1974. Anna unfolded the letter carefully. The ink had bled in some places, but most of it was still legible. The 11th of June, 1974. "My dearest M, tomorrow I leave for London. I told myself I could do it without looking back, but it's a lie. Every road, every train, every sound of the sea reminds me of you. If you come, I'll wait by the station until the last train leaves. If you don't, I'll understand. I'll still carry you with me, even if you never know it. But if you find this letter someday, I hope it means you finally were brave enough to go. Yours always, T. Anna read it twice, then a third time, her hands trembling. M. That could only mean Margaret. The words matched the handwriting on the back of the ticket, the echo of a conversation that had never happened. Her mother's note, "If you're brave, go," had been written to herself. Anna sat in the small reading room long after Marjorie left her alone. The letter rested on the table, the weight of 40 years pressing through the paper. She imagined her mother, standing on platform 3 with that purse in her hand, ticket tucked between her fingers, watching the clock tick closer to departure. Maybe she saw the train. Maybe she saw him waiting. And maybe, for reasons Anna would never fully know, she couldn't take that step. Outside, the train station still stood worn, quiet, but alive with echoes. The benches were new, the signs repainted, yet the bones of the place were the same. Anna walked to platform 3 and stood at the edge where the yellow line faded into gray. She could almost hear the whistle. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a small newsstand that looked like it had been there forever. An elderly man sat behind the counter, reading a paper. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Do you remember a man named Thomas Green? From the 70s? The man looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. "Tom? I remember him. Quiet fellow. Always bought the morning edition before his shift. Do you know what happened to him after he left?" He scratched his chin. "He came back once, you know. Maybe 10 years ago. Asked about someone, a woman, I think. Carried an old letter in his pocket, like he was still waiting for an answer." Anna's breath caught. "He came back?" The man nodded. "Didn't stay long. Took the afternoon train out. Said he thought maybe he'd missed his stop in life." Anna swallowed hard. "Do you know where he went?" The man smiled faintly. "I asked him that. He said, back where it all began near the sea. The sea. Eastbury. Her hometown." Anna stood frozen on the platform, the weight of revelation pressing into her chest. If he had come back, if he had looked for her mother, then maybe their story hadn't ended at the station after all. The wind was sharp off the coast when Anna returned home that evening. The drive from Riverton felt longer on the way back, every mile heavy with questions. She parked near the harbor and sat for a moment, watching gulls dive across the waves. She'd lived by the sea all her life, but that night it looked different, not vast and open, but secretive, like it was hiding something beneath the surface. Maybe it had been holding this story all along. Inside, she placed the letter from Thomas beside the ticket and the photograph from the article. The 3 pieces looked like parts of a puzzle that had waited half a century for her hands. She whispered, "He came here. He came back for you." The idea wouldn't leave her. She needed to know more. If Thomas had returned to Eastbury, someone must have seen him. The town might be small now, but 40 years ago, everyone knew everyone. The next morning she went to the Eastbury Library, where her mother used to volunteer. The librarian, Mrs. Dunn, recognized her immediately. "Anna Hale. It's been years, dear. How's your mother?" Anna hesitated. "She passed last winter." Mrs. Dunn's face softened. "Oh, I'm so sorry, love. She was such a gentle soul." Anna smiled faintly. "I think she had a few secrets. Don't we all?" Mrs. Dunn said with a chuckle. Anna laid the photograph on the counter. "Do you remember anyone named Thomas Green? From the 70s. He might have visited Eastbury." The older woman peered through her glasses. "Green, yes, I do remember that name. Tall man, quiet voice. Used to sit in the reading room, looking through the local paper archives. Always asked about the Hale family." Anna's pulse quickened. "My family?" "Yes. I told him your mother had stayed in town, working at the library. He smiled and said, "Then she kept her promise." That's all. Her promise? Anna whispered. Mrs. Dunn nodded slowly. He came by every summer for a few years, always around June. Then one day, he stopped coming. Anna left the library in a daze. The sunlight on the water seemed too bright, the air too heavy. Thomas had been here. He'd come back not once, but several times. And her mother, she must have known. Why hadn't she told her? She drove to the seaside path, the one her mother used to walk every morning. It wound between the dunes and the cliffs, overlooking the endless gray-blue stretch of the Atlantic. Halfway along, a weathered bench stood facing the horizon, carved with initials faded by salt and time. T+M, 1974. Anna traced the carving with her fingertips, heart thudding. The wood felt smooth, worn down by decades of wind and touch. This is where you met him, isn't it? She murmured. This is where you said goodbye. She sat on the bench for a long time, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence. A single gull circled above, crying into the wind, the same kind of sound that must have followed her mother all those years ago when she decided not to go. And yet, Anna realized, she had gone not on the train, but into a life she had chosen, carrying both love and loss in quiet balance. That evening, Anna went through her mother's old journals, hoping for one mention, one clue. Most pages were about everyday things, garden notes, book titles, recipes, until she reached one dated the 12th of June, 1994, 20 years after the ticket. He came again today. We didn't speak. Just sat by the water, like two people waiting for a tide that never turned. He still carries the letter. I still carry the ticket. Perhaps that's all we ever needed proof, that we once meant to choose each other. Anna closed the journal, tears blurring her vision. So they had met again, many times, quietly, privately, without the world knowing. Her mother had chosen not to leave, but she hadn't chosen to forget. A few days later, Anna visited the cliffs again. Dusk fell slowly, staining the sky in violet and rose. She walked down toward the rocks, the tide low, the wind soft. At the edge of the water, something caught her eye, a small brass locket half buried in sand. It must have come loose from the erosion above. She picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny photograph, two young faces smiling on a bench, her mother and Thomas. The back of the locket was engraved with 4 words, "For when you're brave." Anna pressed it to her chest, closing her eyes. The message wasn't meant for her, and yet somehow it was. That night, she placed the locket beside the ticket and the letter, 3 artifacts from a love story that had survived without ever needing to be fulfilled. She whispered, "Maybe you both were brave, just in different ways." The house creaked softly, as if in agreement. Somewhere outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the ocean through the half-open window faintly mixed with lavender. Anna smiled. "Hi, Mom." The morning Anna decided to take the train, the sky over Eastbury was pale silver, that kind of still light before a storm or a revelation. She hadn't planned it. The idea had simply settled overnight, quiet but certain. She woke before dawn, packed her mother's purse, slipped the ticket inside, and drove to the station. The Riverton line still ran, though barely 2 departures a day, one north, one south. The waiting area smelled of coffee and damp paper. The benches were newer, but the old clock still ticked faintly overhead, its hands moving toward another June morning, almost 50 years too late. Anna sat near the window, the purse on her lap, running her thumb along the edge of the train ticket. The ink had faded almost completely now, but she didn't need to read it. She knew the words by heart. "If you're brave, go." The train arrived with a slow sigh. She boarded. The rhythm of the rails began to work on her like memory itself, steady, hypnotic, forward. Outside, the countryside rolled past, fields dotted with wildflowers, the faint outline of hills in the mist. Each turn of the wheels felt like a heartbeat, each mile a question her mother had left behind. Anna tried to imagine that day in 1974, her mother standing on this very train, the seat beside her empty. Maybe she'd looked out the window and thought of the life she was leaving behind, her sister, her home, the sea. Maybe she'd thought of love, real love, frightening in its pull. But then she must have stepped back onto the platform. A single hesitation, and a lifetime rewritten. Halfway to Riverton, the train slowed for a signal stop. Anna glanced up from her thoughts and saw a small station sign pass by Hartwell. The name stirred something in her. That was where the bench had been, the one carved with T+M. She pressed her hand against the window, watching the station drift by the same platform her mother must have stood on decades ago. A gust of wind swept through the open door at the end of the car, carrying the faintest scent of lavender. Anna smiled through tears. "You're here, aren't you?" When the train reached Riverton, the platform was nearly empty. The town had grown quieter over the years. Even the station seemed frozen in a different time. She stepped onto the platform, heart pounding. The same iron canopy stretched above, the same stone pillars, though worn smooth by decades of travelers. And there on the far bench near Platform 3 lay a single white envelope. Her breath caught. She approached slowly. The envelope was yellowed at the edges but sealed, the name on the front written in elegant cursive. For M. Anna's fingers trembled. She opened it carefully. The 12th of June, 1984. M. I came back again this year. The sea still sounds like your voice. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, you'd come not for the train, but for yourself. If you ever find this, know that I never left angry. We both stayed behind for reasons we'll never have to explain. Some loves don't need an ending. They just need to be remembered. Be brave, wherever you are. T. Anna stood motionless, the words rippling through her like the sound of distant surf. He had written again 10 years after the first letter, still believing she might come. She folded the note, placed it inside her mother's purse, and sat on the bench. Around her, the station was quiet except for the distant murmur of an arriving train. For a moment, she imagined her mother sitting beside her, the same curve of the shoulders, the same quiet strength in the eyes. The loudspeaker crackled overhead. Next train to Eastbury, departing in 10 minutes. Anna hesitated. She could stay. She could leave. Both felt like honoring her mother, in different ways. She looked down at the ticket, the one that had never been punched. Then she smiled and whispered, "Let's finish the journey, Mom." She stood, walked to the gate, and held out the ticket to the attendant. The man squinted at the faded paper, smiled kindly, and said, "Vintage fare, huh?" Anna laughed softly. "You could say that." He stamped it with a loud click. On the ride home, the sea came back into view. The sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of rose and gold stretching across the water. The reflection shimmered through the glass, and for a moment, she saw her mother's face in it, younger, freer, smiling. Anna whispered, "You made it, Mom." The train rolled along the cliffs, and through the window she saw a figure standing near the old bench by the sea. A man in his 70s, silver-haired, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Her heart stopped. She turned to look again, but the train had already passed the curve. The figure was gone. Maybe it had been a trick of light. Or maybe, in some quiet way, Thomas had been waiting for this one last journey to end. When she reached Eastbury Station, the night air smelled of salt and home. She stepped out, the purse in her hand, the sea whispering in the distance. For the first time, she felt she understood the message her mother had written. If you're brave, go. It wasn't about leaving. It was about daring to remember. She tilted her head toward the wind and whispered, "I went." And somewhere beyond the tide, the waves seemed to answer. The next morning dawned soft and windless. The air held that silver calm that always follows a night of reckoning, as though the world too had exhaled. Anna woke early, long before the first light touched the curtains. The purse lay on her bedside table, its clasp slightly open. She reached for it and took out the letter from Thomas, the ticket, and the locket. 3 lives folded into objects small enough to fit in her hands. She smiled faintly. You waited long enough. Time to rest. Downstairs, she brewed tea, the scent of chamomile filling the kitchen, her mother's favorite. The kettle whistled softly, like the sigh of an old train. She took her mug to the window overlooking the harbor. Outside, the tide was high and still. The fishing boats rocked gently, their ropes creaking in the hush of dawn. Something about the light made her think of her mother again, always up early, humming some forgotten tune, watching the day begin. Later that afternoon, Anna walked the familiar coastal path. The same wind-smoothed bench waited by the cliffs, initials still faintly visible. She sat there, the sea stretching endlessly below. For a while, she simply listened. The hush of the surf, the cries of gulls, the low hum of a distant ship's horn. All of it layered like the rhythm of breath. She opened the purse one last time. The locket glimmered in the sunlight. Inside, the 2 faces smiled at her, a promise caught forever in a moment neither of them could finish. She closed it gently and laid it on the bench beside her. Then she unfolded the letter from Thomas and set it next to it. Finally, she placed the train ticket on top, edges fluttering in the breeze. Here, she whispered. The journey's done. The wind lifted the paper slightly, carrying the scent of salt and lavender around her. The edges of the ticket curled as if it wanted to move then. With one small gust, it lifted from the bench and drifted toward the sea. Anna watched it dance through the air before it landed softly on the waves, floating for a heartbeat before disappearing beneath the surface. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. That evening, the weather turned warm and gold. She went back to her mother's house, now her own, and began to pack away the last boxes. Among the books on the shelf, she found one she'd never noticed before, The Great Railway Journeys of Britain. On the inside cover, written in her mother's familiar hand, were the words, "For my daughter, may she always take the train when her heart tells her to." Anna laughed softly, tears blurring her vision. "I did, Mom. I really did." A few weeks later, she developed a roll of film she'd taken during the trip, the station, the bench, the sea. But when she flipped through the photos, one image made her freeze. It was the picture she'd taken from her train window on the way home, the one where she thought she saw someone standing by the bench. In the printed photo, the figure was there, clear, defined, impossible. An elderly man, smiling faintly, holding white lilies. Thomas Green. Her hand trembled. Yet instead of fear, what she felt was peace, as though 2 stories had finally found their ending in the same frame. She placed the photo inside the purse, closed the clasp, and set it on her nightstand. Months later, on the anniversary of her mother's passing, Anna wrote a letter and sealed it inside an envelope marked, "For when you're brave." To whoever finds this, there was once a train that left without its passenger, and a love that stayed waiting long after the station emptied. Sometimes we don't take the journey we think we should, but life finds another way to bring us home. If you ever hesitate, remember this: you can't miss what was meant for your heart. It will find you, one way or another. She placed the letter inside the same purse and tucked it back into the wardrobe drawer where she had found it. Maybe someday, another pair of hands would open it, and another story would begin. The following summer, Eastbury restored its old rail line as part of a heritage project. They reopened the small station museum, displaying photographs and personal artifacts donated by locals. Among them, on a glass shelf beside the exhibit Journeys of 1974, sat a cream purse, a brass locket, and a single preserved train ticket. The plaque beneath read, "The train ticket in her purse, 1974, a story of love deferred, courage rediscovered, and the journey that always waits for the brave." Visitors often paused in front of the display, drawn by something they couldn't quite name, a warmth that lingered, like sunlight through lace curtains or the sound of a faraway train. Some said that if you listened closely, you could almost hear two voices, soft and intertwined, saying goodbye. Sometimes, the greatest journeys never leave the station. They live inside the choices we couldn't make and the love we carried anyway. And sometimes, finding the courage to go doesn't mean leaving. It simply means opening the purse and finally understanding why the ticket was there. If you've ever discovered something that reminded you of a choice you didn't take, a note, a ticket, a photograph, share it in the comments below. Subscribe to Years Ago Stories, where forgotten letters, hidden memories, and quiet goodbyes find their way home.